Have you ever noticed how some of the things you used to worry about just don't seem to matter anymore? Maybe it hit you in the middle of folding laundry, or when you looked in the mirror one morning and didn't feel the need to fix your hair just right. Maybe you used to panic about being late, about what someone said at the dinner table, about the way your house looked when guests dropped by unexpectedly. But now you catch yourself thinking, why did I let that stress me out for so long? That's not giving up. That's growing up. That's wisdom earned from walking through life with your head held high, even when it was heavy with worry. Something shifts when you reach a certain age. You stop trying to control what was never yours to carry in the first place. And the beauty of that shift is something many women don't talk about enough. After 60, you start seeing things more clearly. Not because your vision is sharper, but because your soul is. The fog of pressure and performance begins to lift, and what's left is a peaceful clarity. You realize what truly deserves your time, your heart, and your energy, and what never did. And that, my friend, is one of the greatest gifts of this season in life. So today, we're going to talk about 7 things that just stop mattering after 60. And not because you've stopped caring about life, but because you've started caring about the right things. Let's take a deep breath together and begin with the first one. Let's talk about the weight of other people's opinions. For years, maybe even decades, you might have felt like your choices were under a microscope. What will the neighbors think? Will my kids approve? Do I look appropriate enough? We're raised, especially as women, to be pleasing, polite, and palatable. And while there's nothing wrong with being kind and considerate, it becomes a problem when we shrink ourselves to fit other people's expectations. Margaret, who's now 64, shared something that stayed with me. She said there was a time she used to hold her breath before making any decision. Whether it was buying a bold jacket, painting her front door a bright blue, or even speaking up at family gatherings. She feared judgment. But one day, she caught herself hesitating and asked, "What exactly am I waiting for? Whose permission do I think I need?" That question changed her life. Now she dresses in colors that make her feel alive. She takes painting classes and proudly hangs her art in her living room, even if the lines are a little crooked. And she laughs more. You can hear it in her voice, see it in the way she moves. It's not about rebellion, it's about release. She let go of the burden of approval, and in doing so, she made space for joy. Because at the end of the day, people will always have opinions. But the truth is, most people are too caught up in their own lives to remember what you said or wore last week. The opinions that matter most are the ones rooted in love. And even then, your life is still yours to live. There's a quiet power in walking into a room and not wondering what anyone thinks of you. That's not arrogance. That's grace. That's freedom. And it brings us to another thing that loses meaning after 60. Trying to keep up with trends. Whether it's fashion, technology, or the latest wellness craze, there's this unspoken pressure in our society to stay in the loop. But the loop keeps spinning, and at some point, you realize it's not worth chasing. Frank, who's 71 now, told me he used to upgrade his phone every year, even when he barely used the features on the old one. He wore whatever was considered stylish, even if it pinched at the waist or made his feet hurt. But then something shifted. One day, he slipped on a pair of soft corduroys that actually fit, and he went back to reading paperbacks instead of straining his eyes on a screen. And he felt like himself again. He realized something important. Comfort is not the enemy of relevance. In fact, there's a kind of timeless elegance in choosing what suits you, not what sells. Trends are built on a false sense of urgency. Buy this now or you'll miss out. But what are you really missing out on if it doesn't bring you peace? There's nothing wrong with enjoying new things. If a new gadget makes life easier, by all means, use it. If a new style makes you feel fabulous, wear it with pride. But if you're only buying, wearing, or doing something because you're afraid of being left behind, take a moment and ask, left behind by whom? And does their direction even match yours? You've seen enough seasons in your life to know that what's hot today will be forgotten tomorrow. The music you danced to in your 20s might be playing in coffee shops again. The dresses you wore decades ago, they're probably back on the runway. You've already watched the world spin in circles. You don't have to run to keep up anymore. You get to walk at your own pace. And while you're walking, another thing often comes to mind: regret. That quiet ache for something you said or didn't say, did or didn't do. Regret can sneak in like a shadow at the edge of your thoughts. But after 60, it starts to lose its hold. James is 73 now. He once turned down a job that could have doubled his income, all because it required moving far from his parents. For years, he wondered if he had made the wrong decision. But now, when he sits on his porch watching his grandkids play in the yard where his children once did, he smiles. That job might have paid more, but it wouldn't have given him this. He told me, "I finally stopped judging the man I was back then. He did what felt right at the time. And it turns out, that choice gave me the life I truly wanted." That's the lesson. Regret fades when you meet your past with compassion. You stop seeing yourself through the lens of failure and start recognizing your own humanity. The choices you made were shaped by what you knew, what you could handle, and who you were then. And that's enough. You don't have to rewrite your past to make peace with it. You just have to stop letting it define your present. Every wrinkle, every scar, every moment you once doubted yourself has brought you here. And here is a beautiful place to be. Now take a breath. Feel your shoulders soften. You've already begun to unburden yourself. And there's more to come. As we sit with that idea of letting regret gently dissolve, it opens something inside us, doesn't it? A little more room to breathe. A little more kindness for the person we once were. And with that space, something else becomes clear. Something that used to take up far too much of it. The constant habit of comparing ourselves to other people. Let's be honest. Comparison is one of those sneaky habits we pick up early in life. It might start in childhood, with grades or looks or who had the better lunchbox. Then it grows into adulthood. Who's got the bigger house? Who's traveling more? Whose grandkids seem more successful? Sometimes we don't even realize we're doing it. It can feel so natural, like just observing. But over time, those small comparisons pile up, and they start to wear away our joy. Carol, 67, shared something that really struck me. She said she used to spend a lot of time on social media, scrolling through photos of friends her age taking cruises, celebrating anniversaries, holding hands with grandchildren. And while she never wished them anything but happiness, she admitted she often felt like she was falling short, like her own life was somehow less shiny, less share-worthy. Then one day she walked through her garden and noticed how her hydrangeas had bloomed, quietly, without applause, just growing in their own time. She thought, nobody's posting about this, but this is real. This is mine. That moment changed something in her. The truth is, comparison doesn't just steal joy, it blinds us to what's already beautiful in our lives. Because every time you measure yourself against someone else, you're using a ruler that doesn't fit. You don't know the full picture of their life. You don't see their doubts, their struggles, their disappointments. And even if you did, it still wouldn't tell you anything about your own worth. What matters isn't how your life looks on the outside. What matters is how it feels from the inside. Do you feel safe? Are you loved? Do you wake up and find something, even something small, to look forward to? Then you're doing just fine. After 60, the comparisons start to fade when you stop playing a game you were never meant to win. You start measuring your life not by what others are doing, but by what feels meaningful to you. That peace you've worked so hard for, that freedom to move at your own pace, to choose rest over rush, to say no without guilt, that's success. That's abundance. And speaking of pace, let's talk about another shift that happens, one that often catches people by surprise. The moment you realize you no longer have to push your body to prove something. In your younger years, maybe you were always the one who lifted the heavy things, stayed on your feet all day, skipped meals to finish chores, or powered through pain to show you could handle it. That mindset of always pushing can be hard to let go of, but it's one of the most powerful things to release. Robert, 75 now, used to mow his own lawn every week, even in the sweltering summer heat. He told himself it was good for him, that it showed he was still strong, still capable. But then one afternoon, he got dizzy, lightheaded. His doctor told him gently but firmly, "It's time to let someone else do the heavy lifting." And for a while, that felt like defeat. But then Robert hired a neighborhood teen to help. And now, he sits on his porch with a tall glass of iced tea, watching the young man mow the grass while they chat about baseball. He's still outside, still part of the moment, but without the strain. And he says he's never felt more relaxed. That's the gift of aging with wisdom. You stop measuring your worth by how hard you push yourself. You begin to listen, really listen, to what your body is asking for. Not as a sign of weakness, but as a form of deep respect. You've carried children, held families together, worked, cleaned, lifted, served. Your body deserves your tenderness now. Rest doesn't mean quitting. Slowing down doesn't mean fading out. It means tuning in to your breath, your limits, your needs. You stretch a little gentler. You walk with purpose instead of speed. You take breaks before your muscles shout at you. And you allow yourself to ask for help without shame. There is strength in rest. There is grace in stillness. There is dignity in knowing when to push and when to pause. And here's something not enough people say. You've already proven yourself. You don't need to prove anything to anyone, not even to yourself anymore. And sometimes part of that peace comes from something even deeper, learning to release old anger, letting go of grudges. Because even if your body starts to feel lighter, if your heart is still carrying old wounds, the weight never really leaves. Dorothy, who's 79, once had a falling out with her sister. The details of the argument had faded, but the tension remained. Years passed. Holidays were filled with careful silences. Family gatherings became smaller. But after a recent surgery reminded her how fragile life really is, she picked up the phone and called. They didn't talk about what happened. They didn't untangle the old knots. They talked about their grandchildren, their gardens, their memories. That conversation didn't fix everything, but it softened the edge that had hardened between them. And sometimes that's enough. Letting go of a grudge doesn't mean pretending the pain never happened. It means choosing not to carry it into every conversation, every holiday, every morning you wake up. Forgiveness doesn't always lead to reconciliation. Sometimes it's just a quiet moment in your own heart where you say, "I'm done carrying this." Because when you carry resentment, it becomes a barrier between you and your own joy. It takes up space where peace could live. And the longer you hold on to it, the heavier it becomes, not just emotionally, but physically, spiritually. It shows up in tension, in fatigue, in the way you close yourself off without even realizing it. But you don't need to do that anymore. You've earned the right to feel light, to feel free, to choose peace over bitterness. You don't have to wait for an apology to heal. You can simply decide that your joy matters more than your pain. And that decision, that freedom, belongs to you now. And now, with a little more space in your heart, a little more ease in your body, there's one final burden that quietly fades, and that's the pressure to follow someone else's timeline. That script society hands us, the one that says, when you're supposed to fall in love, get married, have children, retire, slow down, it starts to crumble. And thank goodness it does. Because if there's one thing you've probably learned by now, it's this. Life doesn't follow a straight line. And it sure doesn't hand out gold stars for finishing on time. George is 74. And last year, he did something he'd always dreamed of, but never dared to try. He signed up for piano lessons. He'd played around with music when he was younger, But between work, raising kids, and all the shoulds that come with adult life, he never made it a priority. He used to tell himself it was too late, that learning something new at his age would be silly, even embarrassing. But something inside him, something quiet and persistent, kept nudging. So now, every morning, he sits by the window with his old upright piano, fingers a little stiff but full of purpose. He doesn't care about being good. He cares about being alive in the moment, about doing something that makes him feel joy, curiosity, and pride, not for how well he plays, but simply for showing up. That's the beauty of letting go of timelines. You begin to understand that there's no such thing as too late when something still calls to you. Whether it's starting a new hobby, traveling to a place you've always wanted to see, reconnecting with an old friend, or even falling in love, yes, even now, you have permission. Permission to begin again. Because the truth is, those rigid timelines most of us lived under, they were never really about us. They were about expectations, about comparison, about someone else's idea of what a successful life should look like. But now you see things more clearly. You see that your story is your own. That the most beautiful chapters might still be ahead, and that they don't need to look like anyone else's. And if something inside you has been whispering, "I wish I had," maybe it's time to listen. Not with regret, but with hope. You don't have to rush. You don't have to prove. You just have to start. Start wherever you are, with whatever you have, and let it matter simply because it matters to you. There's a deep kind of peace that comes from honoring your own rhythm. It doesn't mean life becomes quiet or uneventful. It means it becomes yours. Authentically, unapologetically yours. So, as we come to the end of this time together, maybe it's worth taking a breath and asking, what can I release? What weight have I carried for too long? What belief no longer fits who I am? Because here's the truth, my friend. After 60, life doesn't shrink. It sharpens. It gets clearer, lighter. You start letting go, not because you don't care anymore, but because you finally understand what's worth carrying. You've earned the right to feel free, not by avoiding life's hardships, but by walking through them, with grace, with strength, with heart. You don't need to impress anyone. You don't need to keep up. You don't need to justify your choices. You've already done enough. And now you get to live with intention, with softness, with space for what truly matters. Health, peace, purpose, connection. That's what remains. That's what deepens. That's what grows when everything else fades away. So if any of these 7 things have been sitting heavy on your shoulders, just know you have permission to set them down. You don't need them anymore. They've done their time. And now, so have you. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Is there one thing from today's conversation that really resonated with you? Something you've already let go of, or something you're ready to release? Share it in the comments below. Your words matter. And when we speak them out loud, we help others feel a little less alone. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what's coming next. This space is for you, for your voice, your journey, your wisdom. And wherever you are in your path right now, may you carry yourself with kindness. May you wake up tomorrow a little lighter. And may you remember, you are not behind. You are not late. You are right where you need to be. Here's to living your truest, freest, most meaningful life, at any age.